So what we're doing right now is we're going to explain the situation in the Addicks and Barker watersheds and the situation at the dams. I'm going to start with the Barker Reservoir first. This is I-10 to the north. This is State Highway Grand Parkway 99 to the west. This is the West Park Toll Road to the south. This is the dam. This is Highway 6, and Buffalo Bayou is right here. This is east going to downtown Houston. This is the pool of the reservoir. This is meant to be flooded by the incoming water from the creeks that drain out of Fort Bend and Waller and western Harris counties. The concern we have is that this pool is going to fill up and it is going to back into these areas that butt up against the western edge of the pool. And so these maps are the ones that we are trying to get out and get electronically so people can see where you're located here along the western part of this pool. And we have elevations on here so you can look at your streets and determine how high the water is going to get. So this is Barker. This is the one south of Interstate 10. On this side we have Addicks. Again, you have the Buffalo Bayou runs that direction east toward downtown. This is FM 529 to the north. You have I-10 here to the south. The creeks come in from the northwest, out of northwest Harris County. This is the pool. This pool is going to back up and get high, and we will flood some of the areas here in this outlined colored area along the western portion of the pool. And so that is the situation we have right now in Addicks and Barker. And so there's several different subdivisions, there's several different streets. The best way that I can find to explain this is with the maps. It's too difficult to try to explain by roads. Any questions?
You were talking a little bit about why.
So the rain that is falling to the north, and we've had anywhere from 15 to almost 20 inches to the north, that water is coming down the creeks into these reservoirs. These are flood control reservoirs. They are meant to impound water to protect the downstream. What is happening is both of them, Addicks and Barker, although Addicks is rising faster, are in a very rapid state of rise. And so the Corps of Engineers, who control these reservoirs, have decided that they need to start releasing water to mitigate some of that rise in the reservoirs. And what that means is you do not want to have any type of failure of these reservoirs, so you have a controlled release where you control the water that's going out of the outlet structure. That water that is going to start being released tonight from Addicks will go down into Buffalo Bayou and on through downtown Houston and out through the Houston Ship Channel. So that is why we are having releases. The reason why we may flood these areas here, or we will likely flood these areas here, is because the amount of water coming into the reservoir is greater than the amount of water going out of the reservoir.
What's the risk to the dams if you don't do the controlled releases?
Well, if the Corps of Engineers does not do controlled releases, that gets into a situation where there could potentially be a problem at the dam. And that is something you don't want to have to happen. You don't want to have an uncontrolled problem at the dam. Right now, there are no problems at either one of these dams, but you don't want to get into a situation where you could possibly have one. And so at least if you do a controlled release, you have control over the water you're letting in and out.
How many homes approximately is that we're looking at that could be affected by flooding when these dams are released?
There is, I don't have the exact numbers of homes, but there is several thousand homes combined with both of these together. And one thing to keep in mind is that as these pools come up, they will stay up for a very long period of time. We're talking several weeks that this area will be inundated.
What is the possible impact for residents in that area, in those areas?
Initially, it will be street flooding in Addicks. That should start sometime late tonight or tomorrow morning. And then into where it is likely that it will start to go into some of the lowest homes. The same thing on Barker, but a little bit more delayed. Initially street flooding and then potentially getting into some of the homes.
Can you talk a little bit about what the impact downstream is going to be? Is it going to make the flooding on Buffalo Bayou worse?
Right now Buffalo Bayou is at record levels, okay? And with additional rainfall, those levels will not be able to go down very much. So obviously the Corps of Engineers is watching the situation very carefully. they are trying to manage what is happening upstream and what is happening downstream. And so as this comes up, they will initially start with a slow release. They are not going to release all 4,000 cubic feet out of the dam at once. It will be a slow release. The hope is that the rain will give us a break and Buffalo Bayou will start to fall, and that it will not result in higher levels of Buffalo Bayou. With that said, if the rain continues and the release has to be made, it will result in some higher conditions on Buffalo Bayou. And right now, I don't have the numbers of what that means on the downstream part. We're working on that right now.
Okay, so it could potentially make the flooding worse downstream towards downtown, but you guys haven't figured out exactly how much worse you have.
Right. If the rain continues and Buffalo Bayou does not start to fall, obviously adding more water to a watershed that's already high is going to make it go higher. If the rain stops and the water begins to fall, adding more water might just keep it at the same level, because it's going to be falling at the same time. However, given the radar trends out here right now with heavy rain moving in, I don't see Buffalo Bayou going down very much tonight.
Okay. So it's going to get worse along Buffalo Bayou before it
It
gets better.
can potentially get worse along Buffalo Bayou.
If the rain continues and residents decide to evacuate, when is a good time to do it?
I'm going to talk about Addicks because Barker is going to respond slower. It takes the water longer to get down to Barker, so I'm going to talk about Addicks first. The water will get into Addicks tonight, and we will start to see the potential for streets to be inundated sometime tomorrow morning. Given the situation we have tonight with very heavy rain moving into this area, it's not a good idea for people to, we're telling people to stay where they're at right now. We don't want to do this at night and in the dark. We don't want people getting in their cars and driving out here, and there's flooding that is going on out here in this area just from the rain that's falling. So the idea is to prepare tonight, pack up what you need, put it in your vehicle, and when the sun comes up in the morning, then move out. And you don't have to go far, you just have to get out of this area right here.
So this is just the first of many control releases. There's a forecast that it's probably going to continue to rain through next Wednesday. Is there a potential there could be another release possibly next week if there's more rain upstream?
So the Corps of Engineers will continue to watch the amount of the inflow, the amount of water coming into both of these reservoirs, and they will manage the releases based on the safety factors of these reservoirs. And so if they continue to rise, if we continue to get more rain, the potential is there for letting possibly some water out of both. Right now we're more worried about Addicks because it comes up much quicker. So that is why the water is going to be released first out of Addicks. The release out of Barker will come, I believe, a day or so later.
So those areas we're talking about, those several thousand homes, if they're drying out, so you're saying when the release happens, we could see thousands more homes affected by floodwaters?
The releases will go downstream, so the releases will not affect what is happening upstream in these colored areas. The releases will go down Buffalo Bayou towards downtown Houston. There could be additional structure flooding along Buffalo Bayou because of the releases. At the same time, as the releases are happening, water continues to flow into the reservoirs from the upstream creeks. The amount of flow coming in from those creeks is going to be greater than the amount of water that is being let out of the dams. And so the pool, even though water is being let out, the pool will continue to rise. And as the pool continues to rise, it will back up westward into these areas. These areas will flood from the actual pool, not the releases. And that's important because that is a lot of the confusion we had with the tax day flood last year.
Is there a possibility that residents downstream from these two reservoirs that have never flooded before because of Buffalo Bayou, that live along Buffalo Bayou, is there a possibility that some of those residents are actually going to have water in their homes for the first time?
Well, considering we're at record levels right now on Buffalo Bayou with both of these closed, there are people likely flooding that have never flooded before on Buffalo Bayou. If the rain continues, these releases have to be made. Additional structures will likely flood along Buffalo Bayou. But I want to make it clear that if the Corps of Engineers needs to make releases because they have control of the situation. The worst outcome here is if releases are not made, the water continues to rapidly pool in here, that puts a lot of pressure against the dam. The absolute last thing we would want to have happen is something to happen at the dam where we don't any longer have control over it.
Do you have a timetable on the releases based on your rainfall data?
Right now, the releases for Addicks are expected to start at 2 a.m. tomorrow morning, and Barker will be, I believe, 24 hours or so later.
So that's 2 a.m. Tuesday?
2 a.m. Monday morning. Yes. And this is a fluid situation. I know I'm telling you a lot of information. Things could change. Okay, so we might say 2 a.m. If the reservoir slows down some, the rise slows down some, it might be able to be pushed back a little bit. Obviously, we're dealing with real life stuff here, and so it's not exact. It's not an exact science. We're dealing with water moving across the land. And that's why we're watching everything very closely with the Corps of Engineers. They have people out here watching both of these reservoirs. They have eyes on them to make sure the integrity of both of these dams are good right now.
The website, can you get that information out again?
The website where the link to these maps are is www.hcfcd.org. We are also dispensing them to all of the media stations, and hopefully y'all can get them up electronically and put them on the TV and be able to zoom in, and that may help people. Please put them on your websites. I have sent them also to the National Weather Service to get them on their website. The more we can email these are PDFs, so please email them out. Because the best way to look at them is when you're able to zoom in and look at your individual streets.
Is there the possibility that downtown could see flooding?
Well, downtown's already flooding. Downtown's flooding right now from both White Oak and Buffalo Bayous. The travel time from the release to the time it gets to downtown is about 12 hours. So, the amount of water that we're talking about going into downtown compared to what's down there now is not that much different. So, I don't think it will significantly worsen flooding in downtown.
Have we ever had a release of both of those reservoirs at the same time in any other tropical event that could be even more catastrophic for downtown Houston? Have we ever had a release this great from both reservoirs?
We have, the tax day storm was the largest release we made, or the Corps of Engineers made, from both of these reservoirs. If we remember back to the tax day storm, these reservoirs remained closed for the entire event. So the water in Buffalo Bayou was able to go down, and then the water was able to be released out. This is the first time ever that while Buffalo Bayou is flooding and the rain is falling, that they might have to make releases from these reservoirs. This is the first time we've ever done this.
I know you were citing a lot of information on that website off the top of your head. I've just already heard from a couple of viewers that are having trouble accessing that. I just want to make sure we had it accurately.
It is www.hcfcd.org, and I believe everyone is hitting it right now, and it's probably down. And that's why I'm trying to get these maps out to everybody. I'm trying to push the load across everybody to help get this information out.
Is there any of that voluntary evacuation in place right now, or will there be as these releases happen?
There are voluntary evacuations in both of these sections. On Barker, this is the Harris County portion. This is the Fort Bend County portion, and there are voluntary evacuations on both sides. But as I discussed, we really would not like people to evacuate tonight from these areas. We would like to wait until in the morning during daylight hours so you can see what you're doing. We don't want to put people out there in the pouring rain in a flooding condition. You have time tonight to pick up what you need, to pack it up, and evacuate in the morning. And again, this is not a mandatory evacuation. This is a voluntary evacuation, a self-evacuation out of this area. But please go look at these maps before you make any decisions. There is absolutely no reason for people that live back here to be leaving, okay? And there's no reason for people who live back here to be leaving. It is a very targeted area right along the edge of the reservoir.
How much water are we talking about?
That's
going to be released, possibly released?
So we're looking at about 4,000 cubic feet per second out of Addicks. I'm not sure how to put that in a term that people would really understand. It's not a it's not a massive amount of water, but it's a good bit of water.
And I'm sorry, so would that type of water be released, would it be street flooding, or could this possibly go into some of these homes in these areas that you're talking about?
Okay, so the water being released from Addicks is going into Buffalo Bayou. Buffalo Bayou is already flooding. It's already flooding both streets and structures. This water will go in on top of that. So there could be additional flooding of some structures and some streets. I don't know how many, I don't know exactly where, but if the bayou, obviously if the bayou continues to rise, we're gonna have flooding. But the bayou is continuing to rise anyways because it continues to rain on it.
How quickly are they rising now?
The Addicks and Barker,
Yes.
they're rising. I don't know exactly how fast they're rising, but Addicks is rising faster than Barker, which is pretty typical that Addicks rises faster than Barker. There's a lot of creeks that come in here and they get water down here a lot faster.
And how much are they each, I guess, built a hole?
How much water?
Yeah.
I don't know the exact figure of how much water to build the hole. That's a question for the Corps.